All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going to be covering the second of the new subclass options in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and that is the Undead Pact Warlock. Now, just like every other one of these, we're going to do a brief refresher on 5th edition class design. Basically, every class in 5th edition is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. And in order to do that, each class has these things called defining features. And in order to be considered a defining feature, they have to show up within the first 2 levels. For the Warlock, the defining features of the Warlock is actually, or the first defining feature of the Warlock is actually the fact that they can cast magic. They have a feature called Pact magic. And this is how they cast magic. Any other caster class has the spell casting feature, and they all work basically the same way. You get a number of spell slots per spell level. You learn some spells in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes you prepare them, sometimes you memorize them, but and then you pick the spells you want. You choose the slot and the level of this slot, and you cast the magic. That's how it works. Pact magic doesn't work that way. Warlocks themselves get significantly less spell slots than any other full caster. Until 11th level, they only get 2 spell slots, compared to a wizard, which by 5th level has 4 first level slots. I think it's 3 second levels and 2 to the 3rd level slots. So you can see they're extremely limited in the spells they can cast. The different thing about Pact magic is their spell slots are always the highest level spell slot they can possibly be. So at first level, they have 1 spell slot, and it is first level. Second level, they have 1 spell slot, and it's for first level. But third level, they have second level, they have 2 spell slots. They're both for first level. Third level, they have 2 spell slots, but they're now second level. 5th level, they still have 2 spell slots, but they're now third level. And it goes all the way up to 5th level. So up to 5th level, Warlocks are always casting spells, their leveled spells, at the highest level possible. The other defining feature of the Warlock is Eldritch Invocations. Eldritch Invocations are effectively ways to permanently alter how spells will work. Unlike the sorcerer, who kind of modifies spells on the fly as they're casting them because they are an innate, intrinsic caster, they just know how to do it. Warlocks permanently alter their spells. Using these things called Eldritch Invocations. To give you an example, one of the most common cantrips for a Warlock to take is Eldritch Blast. It lets them shoot a number of these blasts at enemies. Agonizing Blast allows them to add their Charisma modifier anytime Eldritch Blast deals a hit. Now, as Eldritch Blast levels up, unlike other cantrips, it fires multiple bolts. Multiple blasts. So with Agonizing Blast, that means every additional bolt gets your charisma damage, and that damage stacks up pretty quickly. Another really common thing for Eldritch Invocations to do is basically take a leveled spell and turn it into a cantrip, so you don't have to waste your very limited spell slots. Armor of Shadows is one that does that. It takes Mage Armor, which is normally a first level spell, and it allows you to cast it on yourself at will without expending spell slot or material components. So that's basically how the Eldritch invocations work. And as you gain higher levels in your Warlock class, you get more access. Now, the other interesting aspect, again, because they have such limited spell slots, is they get their spell slots back on a short rest. Every other spellcaster in the game gets their their spell slots back on a long rest. So Warlocks are very dependent on short rests. Wow, I cannot talk. And because of their Eldritch invocations, they are going to have spells that work in ways that work differently for them than any other class. Even like if a bard were to take Warlock spells, there's still a chance the Warlock is going to be able to cast the spells differently because of their Eldritch invocations. So it's a very customizable subclass, and it's very interesting subclass. So let's dive into the subclass itself, the Undead. Basically, the way Warlocks get their spells, and I've talked about this before, is they form a pact with a powerful being that gives them spells. They don't learn them like a wizard. They don't power them through faith like a cleric or a paladin. They don't just kind of know how it works like a sorcerer. They need an intermediary to actually give them the ability to cast spells. So what they are actually doing is they are casting their Pact Master's spells as opposed to their own. So the Undead means they've made a pact with an undead creature, which can have interesting side effects, to say the least. And just the lore kind of behind it. Well, what kind of undead creature are you forming up a pact with? Is it a lich? Is it a vampire? Is it a mummy? Any kind of undead creature that is sufficiently powerful and has access to spells could theoretically be your Pact Master. And because undead in general tend to be evil-aligned creatures, it's going to be an interesting relationship, to say the least, especially if you're trying to play a good aligned Warlock. So let's dive into the actual features. First level, when you choose this, the first thing you get, which is true of most spellcasting classes, is you get the expanded spell list. Now, the unique thing about Warlocks, as opposed to other spellcasters, a lot of other spellcasters, when they get their extended spell list instead of expanded, generally it means these are spells that they just automatically know. They don't have to prepare, they don't have to learn them, they just know because it's part of their subclass, which is cool. However, the expanded spell list for the Warlock literally just does that. It increases the Warlock spell list so that if you choose to learn these spells, you can. However, sorry, my monitor is flickering for some bizarre reason, and I don't know why, and it's bothering me. So I'm just going to check what all I have open, because it's... All right, so, sorry, back. These expanded spells, you may not choose any of them. If that doesn't fit with how you're building your Warlock, you may just never use them, or you may learn all of them. It's entirely up to you. They just give you more choices. And they're kind of what you would suspect. Things like Bane, False Life, Phantom, Steed, Speak with the Dead, and then when you start getting to the higher ones, Greater Invisibility, Cloud Kill, stuff that you would expect a Lich to be able to do. So those seem like they fit really, really well. The second thing that you get at the first level when you pick up this class is called Form of Dread. As a bonus action, you transform for 1 minute. You gain the following benefits while you're transformed. You gain temporary hit points equal to 1d10 plus your Warlock level, which is nice. Extra temporary hit points are always useful. Once during each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can force it to make a Wisdom saving throw, and if and if the saving throw fails, the target is frightened of you until the end of your next turn, and you are immune to the frightened condition. You can transform a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Get all your expended uses back when you finish a long rest. So this specifically is a kind of triggerable ability. Right at first level, your proficiency bonus is 2, so you can do this twice per long rest. And at first, it doesn't seem like a huge game changer, but because it's a first level ability, it really shouldn't be. But the ability to frighten a creature is pretty useful from an action economy standpoint. We've talked about this many times in this series. Basically, in 5th edition, action economy is the most important balancing factor in combat. Whichever side has more things they can do, more actions just in general, that side is going to have an advantage. And with Form of Dead and the Frightened condition specifically, that can affect the enemy's actions. The Frightened condition gives them to 2 things. First, a frightened creature has disadvantage on all ability checks and attack rolls, while the source of its fear is within line of sight. That's a lot. The only thing it doesn't affect is saving throws, but all of their attack rolls are made with disadvantage, meaning they're going to fail a lot more often. All of their ability checks, which don't happen a ton in combat, but they happen every so often. All of their ability checks are going to be made with disadvantage. Probably the most common ability check to make in combat is a grapple check. If a creature tries to grapple another creature, the instigating creature will roll a strength athletics check, and it will be and the receiving creature will have to roll either a strength athletics or a dexterity acrobatics check, and whoever is higher, if the instigator is higher, they grapple, and if the defender is higher, they don't. And to break from a grapple, you make that same check. The frightened condition would make a creature that is frightened of you, whether or not you are making the grapple, they would still make their grapple check or their grapple defense at disadvantage as long as they can see you, as long as you're within the line of sight. So that's a pretty big deal. The other thing with a frightened condition is the creature can't willingly move closer to the source of its fear. So if it's frightened of you, the creature can't move closer, meaning this is incredibly useful if your warlock is a ranged warlock, which you can have melee warlocks. They're very cool. But if you're going ranged and using things like Eldritch Blast and that, you can literally keep a melee creature from being able to get close enough to do any damage to you and to any of your allies. As long as you position yourself in between the creature and your allies, it will never be able to get close. This is a massively useful thing, because you can make them waste their actions not being able to get close enough to make an attack, and you can make them waste their move action by having to move around you to get where they want. So if you treat this form of dread as a control aspect from the get-go, you're going to get a lot more use out of it. So yeah, really interesting, really cool. Does make this warlock play very differently from other warlocks, which I like. At 6th level, you get Grave Touched. First things first, you don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. You can no longer suffocate. This means you can go underwater and not have to worry about water breathing or holding your breath. No one can strangle you. You never have to worry about suffocation. It doesn't happen often, but in those specific instances where it might happen, it's very useful to have. But that's not the only thing. In addition, once during each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll and roll damage against the creature, you can replace the damage type with necrotic damage, While you are using your form of dread, you can roll one additional damage die when determining the necrotic damage the target takes. This is very big. First things first, being able to replace damage types is always useful. Eldritch Blast, again, is kind of the bread and butter, and force damage is one of the least resisted types of damage. Necrotic damage, a lot of undead creatures are resistant to it, but there are creatures that are weak to necrotic damage, that have vulnerability to it. So that's useful, but that also means any spells you cast, it does require an attack roll. So any spells that you cast that require saving throw, you can't change the damage on. But any spells you cast that require an attack roll, or if you are using a melee weapon, you can now use a melee weapon and do necrotic damage, which will get around creatures that are resistant or immune to non-magic weapons. Any of those things makes it very, very useful. This also means your form of dread, which used to be mostly a control style thing, now makes you do extra damage. And we've mentioned this before, specifically in the College of Spirits. They worded the extra damage for the College of Spirits differently than they did for the Grave to the Touched. For the College of Spirits, you roll a die and add the number on the die as a bonus to your damage. In this, you can roll one additional damage die when determining the necrotic damage. That means if you crit, and this only works on spells or the things that involve attack rolls. So anytime you're making an attack roll, you can crit. You now also, that additional damage will get doubled, unlike the Spirit Bards, which would not be affected by that. So this is now changing your form of dread from first level from something that's still very useful. The frightened condition can do a lot of things, and it can be a very control thing. Now it's turning it a little bit more offensive, and you just do extra damage when you do it. It also gives you an incentive to change damage into necrotic, because you get to do extra damage. Like I said, Eldritch Blast is the bread and butter of warlocks. And force damage is very rarely resisted. So a lot of warlocks might go, well, I'm not going to change it to necrotic, which is resisted a lot more often. Well, with this, if you're in your form of dread, you now can do extra damage. And if you're combining that with Eldritch Blast, the only thing you have to remember is, because Eldritch Blast makes multiple attacks, this is a once per on each of your turns. So you would only be able to do it on one of your Eldritch Blasts, so it's not massively broken. Going to the 10th level, you get Necrotic Husk. You have resistance to necrotic damage. See how I mentioned that whole resistance thing? Well, now you're getting it. If you are transformed using your form of dread, you instead become immune to necrotic damage. Immunity is not something that happens often, and generally most classes that get immunity built into the class somewhere get it to poison damage. Necrotic damage, there are some really nasty spells, high-level necrotic spells that your party will deal with if you're dealing with high-level spellcasters. Being immune to necrotic damage is really nice. But again, that's not all. Wait, there's more! In addition, when you would be reduced to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to drop to 1 hit point instead and cause your body to erupt with deathly energy. Each creature of your choice that is within 30 feet of you takes necrotic damage equal to 2d10 plus your warlock level. You then gain 1 level of exhaustion, and once you use this reaction, you can't do so again until you finish 1d4 long rests. So this, I've mentioned before how I'm not a fan of one and done abilities, because people just don't use them because they're always looking for the perfect at a time. This isn't even a one and done. This is a one and done for maybe a couple days. But with how useful it is, being able to avoid going unconscious is really, really useful. And with it being a one and done, this is something that's going to be used very, very sparingly. But when you use it, it's going to massively change. You do damage that gets higher as your Warlock level gets higher. Always nice. And it's each creature of your choice. So that's within 30 feet of you. So it's basically a 60-foot diameter circle centered on you that anyone within that circle you don't like takes damage. And you get to stay upright. That's a really useful thing. It's nice that they also added the resistance or immunity to necrotic damage, because I don't think that in itself is enough for a level, an entire level of ability. But when you combine both of them, that's really, really cool. It's very, very useful. A get out of death free card is always as useful. And it has enough extra oomph that I think people are going to use it a lot more than your standard kind of one and done ability that I'm not as fond of. Yeah, this is powerful enough that I think the 1d4 long rest and the level of exhaustion is completely justified with just how massively this can turn the tables in a fight. So yeah, super cool. At 14th level, you get Spirit Projection, which is just weird, but weird in a good way. As an action, you can project your spirit from your body. The body you leave behind is unconscious and in a state of suspended animation. Your spirit resembles your mortal form in almost every way, replicating your game's statistics, but not your possessions. Any damage or other effect that apply to your spirit or physical body affects the other. Your spirit can remain outside your body for up to 1 hour or until your concentration is broken, as if concentrating on a spell. When your projection ends, your spirit returns to your body, or your body magically teleports to your spirit space, your choice. That's a really big deal. While projecting your spirit, you gain the following benefits. Your spirit and body gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Very, very big. When you cast a spell of the Conjuration or Necromancy school, the spell doesn't require verbal or somatic components or material components that lack a gold cost. You just get to cast spells. You don't need anything to cast your spells with. You just get to cast your spells. You have a flying speed equal to your walking speed and can hover. You can move through creatures and objects as if they were difficult to terrain, but you take 1d10 force damage if you end your turn inside a creature or an object. And while you are using your form of dread, once during each of your turns, when you deal necrotic damage to a creature, you regain hit points equal to half the amount of necrotic damage dealt. And once you've used this feature, you can't do so again until you finish the long rest. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So first things first, it's a one and done ability. Again, I've talked about how in this thing, I'm not generally a huge fan of one and done. This is, again, so powerful and such a game changer. Super fine with the one and done aspect. Simply because it does so much. So the first thing you do need to recognize about this is effectively a concentration spell, meaning you cannot cast any concentration spells while in your projection form. Otherwise, it will instantly end your projection. The way concentration spells work is if you cast another concentration spell, the spell you were concentrating on ends right as you cast the new one. With this, that could actually be a really useful thing, because when your projection ends, your spirit returns to your body, or your body magically teleports to your spirit's space. So you could use that as a get out of shit free card. You can end the concentration yourself, which is just something you can do. It doesn't require an action. Or you can cast a concentration spell, have the concentration spell take effect, and then you instantly teleport back to your body. And there's no limitation as to how far away you can be from your body. It just can't take longer than an hour for you to get there. So if you guys know you're going to be going into a really, really bad situation, you could spirit projection, leave your body in a completely safe place, go in, and if things start looking bad, you can teleport out and be able to get away without any issues. This also means if you are rendered unconscious for whatever reason, being unconscious breaks your concentration. So if you're reduced to 0 hit points, again, you would teleport back to your body, or your body would be teleported to you. In that particular instance, it would be in your benefit, depending on the situation, to teleport back to your body. If you wanted to protect yourself, or teleport your body to you if you have an ally there that can get you back to consciousness. So there's a lot that can be done with just those two aspects of you can teleport and the body can teleport to you, and it's a concentration spell. Now let's add everything else. Resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Basically, any damage done with weapons, effectively. Any non-magical damage done to you, you now have resistance against. That's always useful. Conjuration and necromancy spells don't require anything. So they can't silence you, they can't restrain you in a way where you can't cast spells. They can't take away your focus in order for you to cast spells. None of that matters. Because you don't need any of it unless the spell requires material components that have a monetary cost. You can just cast spells however. They have to be conjuration or necromancy, but it's still a lot of spells. So that in itself is really cool. And then the flying speed and being able to move through creatures. This effectively means you have a teleportation ability that you don't need to see to be able to teleport. You can literally go through walls, go through bars, go through floors, and take your body with you. You don't need to be able to see, you don't need to be able to hear, you don't even need to know what's on the other side of the wall. Seen as all that happens is if you end your turn within a wall, you take a d10 of force damage. As long as you don't lose concentration, you can just continue going to get through really as thick as you want. If you have a 30-foot movement speed, which is very, very common, that means you can move 60 feet unhindered. When you're going through objects or creatures, it's difficult terrain, so it's half that. So you can move 30 feet per turn if you use your action to dash. That's pretty far. 30 feet of stone would take forever to break or bust your way through. A 30-foot thick wall would not be fun to try and sap or find a way through. A 30-foot thick door would not be something you could take down without a massive battering ram and perhaps a dragon as well. But as a spirit projection, you just go wherever you want. Yeah, it's a one and done thing, but that one time you're going to do awesome stuff. And then the final thing, when you're using your form of dread, once during each of your turns you deal necrotic damage to a creature, you regain hit points equal to half the amount of necrotic damage dealt. That's another big thing. If you get a really high roll, you just get to heal yourself. giving yourself the things that are picking spells that allow you to do necrotic damage means you are effectively significantly harder to kill. And you can transform damage from attack roll based abilities into necrotic. So if you wanted to cast Fireball or something, I actually don't know if Fireball is on the Warlock spell list. I can't actually remember, but I'll find out in just a second here. What are cool, really powerful stuff? Third. Okay, so you don't have that, but oh, and that wouldn't be a spell you could do it on anyway because that's just a saving throw. But it basically anything like any spell that does necrotic damage or has an attack roll that you can just change to necrotic damage, you get to heal for half the damage that it done. This is a really this is almost like paladin transformation levels of cool. And again, but because of how powerful it is, I don't even mind that it's a one and done ability. It is powerful enough that it should be a one and done ability. So final thoughts. Overall, I really like this subclass. Both the subclasses in here are astoundingly good. Wizards of the Coast has definitely been learning as they've been building new classes. We talked about how the Sword Coast Adventurer Guide's subclasses were kind of not up to par when you started looking at Xanathar's, and then especially when you looked at the Tatashas. Well, every time they release new content, they're learning more about how to make unique, interesting classes, and this is definitely one of them. Form of Dread starts off as a really kind of nice control aspect thing, and right at 6th level starts turning into a very aggressive additional damage attack ability. Necrotic Husk gives you a get out of death free card, and gives you a resistance or immunity to necrotic damage, which is always nice. And then that spirit projection is just wow. You get to become a very, very awesome warlock and do amazing things. So highly love this class. Highly recommend giving it a try. And pick up the book. The Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is such a great book. You should pick it up. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and turn notifications on so you don't miss any of my videos when they come out at weird times, like my last D&D did a deep dive. In the comments below, what is your favorite undead patron? Do you want to pledge yourself to a lich? You want to get that cool vampire relationship going on? Or something completely different? Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe you got a Dracolich for a Pact master. Anyway, again, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.